The Retirement Cafe podcast, Dead Man Running, Living with Terminal Cancer with Kevin Webber. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast with me, your host, Justin King. If you're thinking about your retirement or already retired, you're in the right place. My aim is to help you plan for and live a successful and meaningful retirement. Retirement is far more than just a financial event. It's a significant life event, a major transition, which will bring with it new challenges and opportunities. So each episode contains tips, information, and inspiration to help you feel more informed and confident about your retirement. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. It's great to have you here, and I'm delighted this week to welcome Kevin Webber as my guest. Every so often you come across someone in life who is quite simply inspirational. Kevin Webber is one of those people. Back in 2014, life seemed to be ticking along nicely for Kevin until he received a diagnosis that shook his world. Not willing to accept his fate without a fight, Kevin did what he knew how to do best. Put one foot in front of the other and started running. It's fair to say that he's never stopped to look back. I'd like to share my conversation with Kevin with you today. We chat about life before and after cancer, his fundraising mission, some of his running challenges, and his book, Dead Man Running. I hope you find this conversation as inspiring as I did. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin Webber.
All right, thanks for having me.
Lovely to see you, Kevin. I mean, really, absolutely excited about chatting to you this morning. It's a cold, frosty morning here in Christchurch in Dorset. Whereabouts are you today, Kevin?
I'm in a cold, frosty morning in Epsom, Surrey. So we share this cold. Lovely.
Absolutely. Now, Kevin, you've got an amazing story, which I know our listeners are going to be amazed to hear and really... fantastic. You're the author of Dead Man Running, One Man's Story of Running to Stay Alive, which has just come out in Amazon. In fact, in September. That sets up a whole story. Give me just let our listeners know a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, I mean, I always say I really am just an ordinary, average guy. The guy you meet on the street, sort of thing, and. Age 49, married, 3 kids, worked for NatWest for then about 36 years.
Yeah,
mortgage, all the stuff that everyone has. Well, I say everyone, most people have,
Yeah.
Didn't have a door, but I have, 2 cats and that sort of stuff. And life was good, I enjoyed work, I enjoyed life. And then I started going the night for a wee on holiday.
Right.
And couldn't quite understand why, I couldn't put anything with it at all. And then I had a few other sort of just changes below the waist that I didn't quite understand. They were minor.
Right.
I go to the doctors. And that's what most men don't do. Women are pretty good at going to the doctors, but men are rubbish at going. So I went to the doctors and I thought I was wasting his time. I remember thinking, God, he's going to hate me. Then actually just so busy and I'm going to sit there and he said, and I explained the problems I had. And he said, okay. And he gave me what I call the doctor's special handshake, first of many I experienced since then. And a blood test is a thing called a PSA test.
Right.
And he claimed that it was trying to look for prostate cancer markers. And so I said, okay, fine, and my dad had prostate cancer, curable, and my dad died with it, not of it. Definitely died, so, fine, good old innings and stuff. And so I thought, okay, I had my blood test, I got back, and I managed to score about 1 or 2 at my age, at 49 as I was then, and I scored 342. They looked at me and without doing any further investigations, he just said that you probably got prostate cancer, but a score that high, it's unlikely you hadn't. So then I had 2 months of...
So Kevin, can I just interrupt a second? So you went to the doctor. So you obviously kind of knew you had a problem. So how quickly did you get to your GP?
Oh, pretty quickly. I mean, it was. We're talking. This is now 7 years ago, so it was quite easy. And my dad and myself shared the same GP for years.
Right. So you get to see the GP, and then does he have to send some stuff off for tests, or do you have to go somewhere for tests, or what was the time scale here?
Okay, so the first bit was pretty quick. So the blood test and the handshake. The handshake was instant. The blood test within the next week.
Okay.
And then again, and then once he'd decided it was possibly cancer, the NHS have a pathway where you should be seen by a cancer specialist within 2 weeks.
Right.
Hit it, but in my case they did. So I was booked in straight away to see another doctor who had chubbier fingers and sovereign rings. So the men, avoid those guys if you're having their special handshake. And at that meeting, he said, I wouldn't normally diagnose at this size, but from the readings you have and from what I can feel, you've got prostate cancer.
Wow.
But prostate cancer to me at that point in time was curable. I know my dad had it and was cured of it or lived with it. A friend at work, Hugh, he had it. He was 59 and he'd had it, and he had an operation and he was fine. So I thought, it's great. I'm going to be fine then. I could do without it, but I had these 2 months of tests where I was a bit nervous, but I was convinced, because everyone I'd spoken to was cured, that I would be in the same camp. And then I sat in a doctor's office with my wife, 6th of November 2014, to be told that it had spread to other parts of my body. The biopsy indicated it was growing pretty fast, or fast. Wow. And, I might only live 2 years, and if I was lucky, 3 to 4. Lots of tears. And one of the things that happens whenever you get given that kind of prognosis for anything in life is the first thing you stop doing is it stops your ability to dream. And I don't mean, dreams that don't make sense. Dreams of your future, because I was 49 years old. I was expecting at some stage in my life for my daughter to get married, for me to be a granddad.
Yeah.
My 9-year-old son to do his A-levels, and for me to retire one day and drive around Europe in a camper van, all those things that all have those, plans, if you don't like the word dreams, but plans for the future suddenly all stop dead. It's just like, well, that's not going to happen. And of course, coincide that with my understanding that I had 2 years of grim treatment a year of grim treatment and a year of going downhill and dying. Actually, my life was already over. I didn't have 2 years at all. That was it. It was gone. And
how did your children and your wife react to this? What was their kind of emotional kind of, how was it at home?
I guess only they can really answer that. But from what I could see, my wife's always been really supportive, and her way often with dealing with things is she doesn't want to know about the future in terms of she will just deal with it today.
Mm.
Knows what the future is. She comes to the doctor's appointments with me, but in terms of really going into it mentally, it does no good for her to worry about the future. For me, I'm someone that likes to know what's going to happen, and I can put it in a compartment and not worry about it. But for some people, once they see it, they can't stop looking at it. So, my wife has a great expression. If you wake up in the morning and you feel okay, it's going to be a good day. And she's absolutely right, because too many people, you see them worry about things they can't change and spoil today. Even in my situation, I know of men who got diagnosed now, and from that moment onwards, their life was just miserable. Mm. And they didn't do anything else. They did all the wrong things. So they thought, well, I'm going to die in 2 years. Therefore, I'll eat pie and chips every day because I like that. I won't exercise ever again. I'll get drunk every night because that's how I'll deal with it. And they didn't even make 2 years.
Right. So tell me what was so how did you, you're 2 weeks, you're sitting there, you're getting the news, you got 2 years and you got this year's worth of treatment ahead, and then this year of, Gordon Bennett, just feeling pretty awful as you slowly ebb towards your box, that the emotional feeling of that. I can't understand what that must be like.
I suppose if I go back, the first couple of days, it was all about woe is me. I remember lying, crying, thinking, I don't want to die. I'm only 49. How come, before I went to the doctors that day, I was going to live until I was 80-something in my head. And then literally an hour later, I'm going to be dead at 51. And that was tough for me for a couple of days. And then I stopped being selfish, quite so selfish, and I started then about my wife and kids, because that was. I then just thought, that's terrible for them. I get the easy, you know. I've always said for me, I get forbearance. I get people, you know, tell me I'm amazing for some of the stuff I do, and then along the way I'll get some great drugs, and then I'll slowly go downhill, and that'll be it. But no one helps my wife today or my kids, apart from me. No one ever says to my wife, "Oh, don't go to work today because you don't feel great," or "Don't worry about it, and here's somebody to help you," or "You're amazing for supporting Kevin." No one ever says that. So, and then of course, then she's got to watch me die, and then she's got to deal with my death, and then she's got to deal with afterwards. And without in any way trying to be chauvinist, there are jobs in most households that the ladies do, and there's jobs in most households that the men do. And she'll have to worry about fixing the tap and going to the loft when there's a roof leak and cutting the grass all the time and all that sort of stuff, which I know she can do, but that's not what, you know, we both signed up for together at the time we got married. And so at that moment in time, I spent then the next 2 months probably just being really sad for my family, I guess, just because it was my fault, you know. And I appreciate it wasn't my fault. Prostate cancer is a cancer that you don't ever knowingly get. You know, it's not like lung cancer where if you smoke all your life, well, you're probably gonna, you know, probably will be your fault in some way if you get it. No one knows why you get prostate cancer.
Right.
It is hereditary in part, not always, but it is in part. And sadly, it also is if you're black. If you're black, so you have a higher risk. Now, 1 in 8 men get prostate cancer in the UK. So that's, you know, think about that in the people you know, in the circle of friends you might have, 1 in 8. Then if you're black, it's higher. And if your dad, brother or uncle's had it, or granddad, it's higher as well. So in my case, my dad had it, and my GP never thought to tell my dad that I had a higher risk and therefore I should have a test, or tell me that my dad. And I guess I can understand why maybe he couldn't tell me because confidentiality, but he could have told my dad to tell me.
Yeah.
You know, and that's and to be fair, I don't have any malice over that. It's just one of those things. But that's why, for me, one of my missions in life is making sure that no one else gets into the situation I was in, when maybe, I don't know, I still have got prostate cancer, but maybe I'd have been in the curable area, because 82% of men on diagnosis will be cured.
Wow.
So the 82% could be 84 or 85 or 90 if the doctor's a bit earlier.
Right.
And I didn't hang around. You know, I went to the doctors within 4 weeks, 5 weeks of actually having symptoms. It's likely, because prostate cancer is quite slow growing, that I had it in me for maybe even a couple of years beforehand.
Right.
If I'd gone in the previous year and a half, it's possible at that stage I would have been cured, and that would have been the end of it. So that's, you know, and people say it's a man's disease, you know, but actually I would argue it is a family disease, because, you know, I said my wife has got to deal with it, my kids have got to deal with it, my daughter deal with it, and I said already they get it worse than me. So, you know, there's an important job here for people who hear this. Is one, yes, themselves, but secondly, their friends, their family. And that also applies if you're a lady. You know, if you're a lady and you're married and your partner's next to you in bed and you get up at night for a wee, then you should be saying, "Oh, you go and see the doctors," because actually that's a very, very, very good advice for any man. And, you know, prostate cancer is a funny thing. As men get older, their prostates naturally grow. There's nothing wrong with that. It does naturally grow.
Right.
And when the prostate is right next to the bladder, so when a prostate naturally grows in older age, so we're talking over 50, then it will push against the bladder, which is why a lot of older men get up in the night for a wee. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It's just that their prostate is growing because they're older. But also, if you have a tumour on your prostate and it's on the side of the prostate of the bladder, then that will push on the bladder and that will make you go for a wee. So that's why every man shouldn't think, "Oh, I'm only going to have a wee because my prostate's grown." They should think it's unlikely but possible. It's prostate cancer, early stage, let's go. In my case, I was unlucky. It's likely that the prostate cancer started growing on the other side of the prostate. So by the time I got up the night for a wee, it had grown all the way through the prostate, because when I had my biopsy, all of my prostate was cancerous.
Right.
If you're curable, normally, you know, 1 or 2 cells out of the 18 they take might be cancerous. In my case, everyone was cancerous.
Right.
Parts of the prostate. So,
wow.
important message for men.
Yeah.
Now, a man dies every 45 minutes of prostate cancer in the UK. That's when you think about it, it's what, 30 men a day, thereabouts. That's quite a lot. I know, it doesn't quite match coronavirus, but actually it's pretty big. It's the biggest male cancer in the UK.
Right. Really significant and a really important message. So 2 months in, you're feeling pretty sorry for yourself. It worries me, as you said. What happened next?
So I guess I've already realised that I felt okay at that point in time. And if you feel okay, there's no point sitting at home moping. So I went out and did some stuff. So I went away on holiday with my wife and some friends over New Year, which we don't normally do, and just sort of did good things. And as for my kids, I tried to behave the same way I always did. I didn't feel I had the right to make their life worse by constantly going on about prostate cancers. I don't really talk about it. I did talk to them about it when the day after I was told. I told them it was incurable. I didn't say I only had 2 years to live. I didn't see the point of making a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old think they only got 2 years. That would have been unfair on them. And actually, as it turned out, luckily, it also been untrue. But my 9 and 14-year-old were upset, but kind of got on with it. My 16-year-old did exactly what you shouldn't do and got on Google. And of course, when you go on Dr. Google, yes, the right stuff is there somewhere, but there's a hell of a lot of wrong stuff as well.
Yeah.
So you should, if you go onto Google ever, you should really think about what sites you're looking at and restrict yourself to charity sites or the NHS or something, rather than go weird Colombian blue scorpion venom cure for prostate cancer, which allegedly exists out there. So you do no good looking at the extreme stuff. And so I try to behave as normal dad to them, and still do. Well, I say normal. It's not normal anymore, but what I consider to be normal. And I went for my first chemo session, and of course, chemotherapy is, we've all heard about chemotherapy, and you see people on TV and you read about it, and it's grim. There's nothing nice you can say about chemotherapy. Oh, added to that, I hated all my life, I've hated the thought of having a cannula in my arm. I don't mind injections, but the thought of having a constant feed into my body, it always scared the pants off me. I never had to have it. And of course, with chemo, you have to have it. So I remember the first session, you wanted to pull this thing out of my hand the whole time it was going on. And the room you go into, there were 5 other people in the room, all having different sorts of chemo. No one's smiling. Just a horrible experience in itself. And then after you come home and you feel sick and your tongue goes black and you lose the sense of feeling in your fingers and toes and your nails crack and you feel sick all the time. And I remember coming home, sitting in a chair, just thinking, this is it. I feel rubbish now. This is the way it's going to be the rest of my life. Having the day before chemo felt right. Suddenly, yet again, I'm now 1 day on and everything's gone wrong. I went to bed and I tried to sleep, but of course you can't sleep when you have chemotherapy because they pump you full of steroids, because the chemo is supposed to kill the cancer, but it actually kills some good stuff as well.
Right.
So the idea of the steroids try and keep the good stuff going. And having steroids is like having double espressos. So it's bad enough. I mean, every day I still have 2 steroids, but then I was having 16.
Wow.
So might as well have just been drinking coffee non-stop. So you're lying awake with the worst thoughts in the world, feeling awful, and crying whilst your wife's asleep because you don't upset her again. And the next morning I got up and it was January and it was cold and miserable and grey, and I just looked out the window and I felt rubbish, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to go for a run. And
Were you a runner already?
Yeah, well, I used to run a bit before. I used to run a couple of marathons a year just to stay fit.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't very good at it, but just it was an excuse to go out and run a couple of times a week and have a goal once a year or twice a year and to do a bigger race.
Yeah.
And I did run a longer race where I ran 100 kilometres from London to Brighton, just because I realised going slower and longer is less damaging than going shorter and faster.
Right.
I was pulling muscles and all sorts of stuff. When you go slower, you don't tend to pull so many muscles. And so I looked out the window and I thought, I have a choice. It really was like an epiphany, really, I guess. It was give up on everything now and be a victim and just become that person that sits at home being miserable, drinking every night, eating all the wrong foods, not exercising. And I would say to anyone listening, forget cancer for a minute. If I said to you, more meat or more fruit and vegetables, most people would go, yeah, more fruit and vegetables. If you said more exercise or less exercise, most people would say, yeah, more exercise. Smoking or don't smoke, they say don't smoke. More or less alcohol, would probably say, yeah, less alcohol. So that's how a healthy person should try and stay healthy. Then if you actually are ill, even more so, that becomes important to make yourself as strong as possible so that you can work with the drugs and help delay whatever's going on, or maybe cure whatever's going on inside you. So, yeah, so I thought I'll go for a run. And a week before I ran 20 miles, because I could run that far, all I could manage was 3 miles. And they were really low, and I felt really sick, and I got back and felt absolutely shattered, but also elated, because I'd already said to you earlier, cancer takes away all your ability to dream. And so everything in my life was almost sort of, what's the point? What's the point of learning? What's the point of staying healthy? What's the point of anything?
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly it was actually, if I can still run, it might be different running, but if I can still run, then actually I can buy a running magazine. Then I can buy some new shoes. Then I can look at a race maybe next month. And in a short-term plan, have a plan still, opposed to just give up on everything. So I went for a 3 mile run, and then I ran a bit more. And I'd already entered the Brighton Marathon before I was ill. And I said to my doctor, I said, I want to run the Brighton Marathon. He said, yeah, but it's week 13 of chemo. You can't really do that. And I said, well, I want to do it. And he said, well, okay, if you can train for it, you can do it. And to be fair, I went into chemo quite fit, and then had to get fit again because it just kind of took everything away almost straight away. And so I was going out running 6 miles, 8 miles, 10 miles, just trying to get back to where I was. And I think the most I ran was about 16 miles in one go. And then the Brighton Marathon came, and I ran that. And the year before was my fastest ever marathon. I did the Brighton Marathon in 3 hours 48, my only ever sub 4 hour marathon. And I did it in 4 hours 36, so 50 minutes slower than the year before.
Amazing. So you were still in chemotherapy at that time, or?
That was week 13 of chemotherapy.
Wow.
And a friend, a last minute place in London Marathon. It was a bit of a hooky place that you shouldn't ever do, by the way, but I thought I was dying to come and see me. Someone else, which you're really not supposed to do. And I'm not proud of that as a thing, but hey, that's what I did. And that was 2 weeks later. That was week 15 of chemo, and I ran that 12 minutes faster. So I never thought I had 2 marathons in 2 weeks in me anyway, let alone on chemotherapy. So, and both days, when I crossed the finish line, it was just, I was ecstatic because I never I'd be there. That was never going to happen. And then suddenly it's happened. And I'm there, and my wife was there, and it was fantastic. Really
brilliant,
really good moment for me. And also I raised a lot of money for charity because, I'd always raise money for charity whenever I run marathons, but most years maybe £1,000 if I was lucky.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm raising £20,000 by running with prostate cancer.
Yeah. I can see people going, this is worth putting my hand in my pocket for. This guy's going through the mill and he's running marathons.
Bit of a sympathy vote probably, but hey, going to a good cause, so that's fine. And then I got home and from the second marathon, talking to my wife, and she knew there's a race I always wanted to run ever since. I used to run a tiny bit of my time, and just to stay fit for playing rugby, I used to play rugby.
Right.
And there's a race called the Marathon des Sables, which is like a big race. I remember reading about it when I was 20 years old. And I'd love to do that, but it was so off the scale. As far as I was concerned, actually, I'd never be able to do it because I couldn't probably afford the training, or actually have the ability to do it even if I trained. And then I said, well, why don't you go and do it? So I was talking to my doctor, and I explained what it was. And he said to me, why would anyone want to do that, let alone someone in your situation? Which I remember we just all laughed. It was quite a good, funny situation. And so what is it? So Marathon des Sables, in very simple terms, is a marathon Sunday, a marathon Monday, a marathon Tuesday, a double marathon Wednesday, a marathon Friday, half marathon Saturday, in the Sahara, carrying everything on your back for the week, all your food, sleeping bag, a venom pump in case you get bitten by a snake or scorpion, You get water every 10k. Other than that, it's self-sufficient. The temperatures get to 50 degrees centigrade every day in the shade, of which there isn't any, of course. You go over mountains that require ropes to pull you over. The sand dunes are 200 feet high and go on for 10 miles at a stretch. I mean, it's a tough old race. And so I went to tell my doctor, and well, if you can train for it, you can do it. That old story again, thinking I wouldn't be able to train for it. And I spent the next year training, doing longer races in England. Had a few setbacks with the cancer. Drugs stopped working. Tried other drugs, they didn't work. And then started another drug, which, if I was lucky, would last for a year, but also was damaging my liver and kidneys. And then by some miracle, it stopped damaging my liver and kidneys. So that drug was okay. And that let me carry on being reasonably normal. So April 2016, boarded the plane, not convinced I'd finished the race, but a year and a half before, I wasn't even going to be there in my mind. Put my foot on the start line and loved it. Finished the race about halfway down the field.
Amazing.
Just loved it and got back. And I remember thinking, well, that was great. Wouldn't mind doing it again, but I can't really say, let's do it again. And my wife said, got to go and do it again. So then I kind of got the bug and I raised more money that way. And I said, well, actually, I should just do more of this. And so I worked for NatWest, and my employer, to be fair, absolutely fantastic. The CEO phoned me up and just said, Kevin, just see your family, stay fit, come to work, do some presentations for us about living in the now, chasing your dreams, not giving up. And that's what I've done ever since. And so I've now done that race 4 times. So these are big races, they're 250 kilometres. So I've raced across Cambodia, Albania, Jordan, Spain, twice across the Arctic non-stop, pulling a sledge for 120 miles. I mean, that's probably the toughest race I've ever done. It's so cold. It's minus 40 or worse. And when you stop, you just literally, you're on your own and you just throw your bedroll in the snow and that's it. And you lie there for 3 hours trying to sleep in a little coffin-shaped bivvy bag thing. And you just constantly worry about wolves, polar bears, moose, Arctic lynx, frostbite. I may have cancer, but I really don't want to get eaten by a polar bear to die. That would be And then you get up 3 hours later having not slept, and you just keep on, you do about 23 hours non-stop putting your sledge, and then you just stop for 3 hours and you get up again and go again.
So as you progressed into all of these things, where were you at with the cancer?
So that drug I talked about that should, if I'm lucky, last for 12 months, is still lasting for me 5.5 years on, which is virtually unheard of.
Wow.
So I'm just very lucky. I got to know about 20 men who were diagnosed either a year before or a year after me with the same cancer as myself, in the same situation. It spread, and they're all now dead apart from one. And funny enough, that guy runs as well. So you look at it and I don't know, I can't tell you what I do is right, but by doing a bit more vegetables and a bit less meat, and I don't smoke anyway, and a bit less alcohol and a lot more exercise, maybe I'm making a difference. I do Chinese medicine and acupuncture and stuff, and it could all be a waste of time. And maybe my destiny is that I'm going to die on the 15th of June 2023, and nothing I've ever done has changed that. Or maybe I can change it. And I just, some people feel when they have any problem in life that it's hopeless. And what's the point of taking a small step, because a small step's not enough? But actually, no one ever knows what small step might be the one that makes a massive difference. It'd be like climate change, really, isn't it? We could all say, what's the point of me doing my little bit? It's not going to make a difference. But if we all do that little bit, then maybe collectively it might make a difference. So in my bit, a bit less of this, a bit more of that every day, collectively might be enough to keep things going. And when I first was diagnosed, my doctor was pretty appalled that I was going to keep on running. Now, if you ask him, he'd say, if you have chemotherapy and you have cancer, we'd ask you to keep on doing any exercise you've got. I mean, you shouldn't suddenly up your exercise massively. That would be wrong. But they've now realised that exercise helps you tolerate chemotherapy better and generally makes it work better as well. So in the past, a lot of these things the doctors say no, it's not because he didn't know the answer was don't run. It just didn't seem right to him. So in everything in life, people give you opinions. Sometimes it's based on facts, then go with it. If it's based on I don't know, then it's your choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Decide what's right for you. And I'd rather die by my own sword and make a mistake and do it my way, or live by my sword, than just rely on someone else. It's like getting on a package holiday, and you're told you can get off here and have a wee. I'll now look at that castle or that church and get back on the coach now. We're eating here. You can do that. And sometimes that's great. You have a great holiday. And sometimes, again, with a cancer journey, it could work really well for you. But actually, why shouldn't you at some stage go, do you know what? I think I'm going to get off here because I think right now I could do something myself that I think can make a difference. What I've done. So I haven't ever gone against what the doctors say. The NHS are amazing and I would trust their treatment path always. But what's wrong with on the side doing things, as I said earlier, that most people would say are good for you? I mean, my exercise is a bit extreme. I do run a lot. And a lot more than you probably need to. But I love it. It gives me a sense of freedom. You forget. So when I do the last race I did actually was back in the Sahara in October this year. I didn't finish it. It was my 5th attempt at the Marathon des Sables, and I got smoke poisoning before the start.
Yeah, so we've had another guest on who was on that race as well, and it sounded a bit of a nightmare. There's half the fleet went down, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I was helicoptered out of the race after 15 kilometres, spent 2 weeks in a medic tent, just everything coming out of everywhere.
Yeah.
But, I spent about 10 seconds literally being sad for myself. First of all, I thought, oh, well, I won't do my 5th one. And secondly, I was on a running streak. I'd run every day for the last 653 days. And I realised on the Monday of the race that was the first day I wasn't going to run for 653 days. But once that had gone, I just thought, well, okay, so that's finished. I can't do the race anymore. I can't run anymore today. What can I do? So even though I didn't feel very well, I was planning what I was going to do next. It's so important to have something to look forward to in life. If people go through life and drift through life with nothing to look forward to, I think it's really, really important to look forward to something because it makes every day better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kevin, I'm interested just from a kind of from my own profession, financial planning perspective of how did it affect your, on diagnosis, how did it affect your kind of thought process around money and the family and, retirement that maybe you'd been planning in the future? How did what went on there and did you plan, had you kind of thought about this type of stuff before, or, tell me what the ramifications were you initially around the family and money?
Okay. So I've worked for NatWest for over 40 years now.
Wow.
In my 20s, 20 years into the bank, so I was probably about 35, 40, I used to be a private bank manager and I looked after loads of high net worth individuals. And I say high net worth, they were just above average earners. And I saw lots of them have problems because they got ill, they got cancer or heart attacks, went blind, all the horrible things that might happen. And they weren't often prepared for them. And I knew what the right advice. I never sold. I introduced them to people who sold policies. I didn't sell them myself. I guess I was like a GP in doctor's terms. So I'd see them, decide what was wrong, if anything, and if there was something wrong, introduce a specialist. That was my job. And I remember introducing a number of people to specialists who then, some of them went on and had problems. And because of the specialist introduction, actually, they didn't have a problem financially. And I also remember other people who I suggested saw a specialist but wouldn't, then have a problem and then had no money. And I do appreciate all these things about affordability. If all you can do is afford to put food on the table, then you can't go any further than that. I understand that. But when you get to a certain level of income, you have a choice. You can go out eating 3 meals a week at a restaurant, or maybe have 2.5 meals a week in a restaurant and put a little bit of money aside for something that makes sense. And that's what I chose to do. And I insured myself against, I had life cover, because that's always sensible if you've got any debts or family. But I also took out some serious illness cover. So on diagnosis of prostate cancer, it paid out a reasonable sum. It cleared my mortgage and it gave me a few quid in the bank, that helped me have a better life. I didn't have to worry about things, and I still work for the bank now, so I'm still employed by the bank, so I haven't lost my salary, and that enabled me to pay for some of these races because they're not cheap.
No.
Going to Cambodia and stuff, it's not. You don't get £5.50. And so, of course, at first I was supposed to live 2 years. So, like a lot of things in life, you can say, well, actually, I've got loads of money for 2 years, and then I kept on living. So I now have to be more careful about what I do, but I get up. And so I had those policies, and I made sure that I used the money sensibly. What I still find surprising is that, bear in mind I was 49, all my friends I've said, well, you should consider this. And these are friends, nothing to do with the bank or clients or anything. So the last job I did that was client facing, I was a corporate manager as opposed to a personal bank manager. And I said to my friends, you should consider these things. And none of them have. And I think you look at me and you think, well, Kevin can afford to do things because, and yet they're not prepared to allocate a small part of their income just to the what ifs. And I remember my dad saying to me, my dad never took out insurance. I remember he was about 55, so I'd have been 20 or something. And he said to me, oh, well, that's the life policy. That's the mortgage paid off, he said. Never took out a life policy. What a waste of money that would have been. And he's right, isn't he? Insurance is either the biggest waste of money or the best thing you ever did.
Yeah.
Just a gamble. And you have to just say to yourself, though, if the worst thing happens, will you have a regret? And one of my massive things in life now is never create a new regret. So will you regret spending whatever that costs a month to insure yourself in case you have a problem and you have a mortgage still? No, you won't. You won't. Even if you don't pay it, you might go, a bit of a waste of money. But at least you say, well, but I've always covered that peace of mind every night for you, and not just you, often your spouse.
Yeah.
Because often, and I am being a bit chauvinistic here, I've seen it where the man thinks, that's okay, I'm going to work. I'll always be able to pay the mortgage off. And then the wife's sitting there thinking, well, I read about that bloke that died the other day and I'm worried about it, but she won't mention it. So you've got a situation maybe for 25, 30 years where one person's not happy, but not prepared to raise that with the other person who just shrugs their shoulders. So actually, this should be a family discussion because it will affect the family if it goes wrong. It's not just I don't think I need it, therefore I won't. It should be something that is chatted about. So to answer a long answer for your short question, but I've been very fortunate. And even now, I could have through work I can buy a certain policy and I could have cancelled it because it won't pay out for cancer again. Because now once you've had cancer once, it won't pay for any cancer. But I haven't cancelled it because I could still have a stroke. I could still go blind. I could still be paralysed. So all those things, if any of those happened, it would trigger another payout.
Yeah.
It's the lottery you don't want to win, but people pay the lottery, every week, and most of them know they're never really going to win, but they still pay for that. And that's something that just, if they got the money, it would just change their life massively.
Mm.
Yet they won't put that same money, they'll do 25 quid a week on a lottery and they won't put that into something that makes far more sense.
Yeah.
Off we went wrong. So I am a fan of yours in terms of what you do.
Yeah. And, I was similar to yourself. I bought a policy when I was a younger man and I've still got the policy going and I'm still paying the premiums. And, I did convince a couple of my pals to take out some protection. And one of them, like yourself, had a serious illness and he's still around and he's still healthy and good, etc. And he's recovered well and it's great. But yeah, he had a big payout and it was a gift to his family, really. It was a gift in that period where they were very concerned about whether he was going to be alive or well or continue to be with them. He also put a few quid in the bank to just go, look, it's going to be all right, and I think that relieves, it's you'd feel pretty foolish, wouldn't you? I think if you'd had the opportunity to buy it and you hadn't, especially when you turn around to maybe your spouse and go, or your partner, whoever it may be, and go, yeah, I did think about it, but I just didn't get around to it.
Yeah, and that's almost how important is that? You plan holidays. The old age. If you had a machine that printed money, in the back garden, you'd insure it, wouldn't you? You'd make sure it was serviced and everything else. Well, that's you.
Yeah.
You know, if you're the breadwinner, that's you. And it's funny, if you've got a family and a mortgage, people say, oh yeah, I've got life cover. But actually, if you die, it's almost the easiest way out, because if you die, then your partner has some choices. They might meet someone else who can carry on paying. They might downsize. You know, they have some choices. They then go out to work and earn some more money themselves, perhaps. But if you get ill, like really ill, and therefore you lose your job, and then you require care at home, then you've still got the mortgage. Your partner can't go out to work because now they're at home looking after you all the time. And so actually you would argue it's far worse by living with a bad illness than it is death for the other person.
Yeah, yeah.
There's different choices when you're ill, when you're at home. You know, if you're housebound, the choices are taken away from you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what's next for Kevin Webber?
Ooh, so so about 6 years ago, when I started raising money for Prostate Cancer UK, I realised that it gave me a sense of worth and a sense of purpose. You know, I enjoyed the running because it gave me a sense of freedom. But actually, I realised if I could do this, then I could encourage other people to hopefully make sure people aren't in my situation, but also live their lives a bit better. And so I think I said to you earlier, I went from woe is me to woe is my family to woe is anyone with prostate cancer to where I am now. With actually woe is anyone with any problem, because, you know, I do a fair number of presentations and things. The bank encourage me to do that sort of thing. And people come up to me after and say, oh, you know, Kevin, you know, I've got a few problems, but nothing like yours. And I say, but to you, your problems are just as bad as mine. So whether you've lost your job, you know, your car's broken down, you can't afford to fix it, your partner's left you, you've got a family health crisis, at that moment in time, your world is ending. You don't know what to do. And that's just as bad as my life. And so I try and help people get out of these holes. And that's why it's about looking forward to things. There's a great poem called Beyond the Bend in the Road. And I can't recite it to you. But Beyond the Bend in the Road poem is basically saying, worry about what's in front of you. What's around the corner is around the corner. And when you get there, it might be great, it might not be great, but that will be your problem when you're there, or enjoyment. But for now, just worry about what's in front of you. And that's the bit about it, is what can you change today? You know, you can choose every day to smile or scowl. You know, when you get up in the morning, you can go out and you can everyone, or you can smile. You can, you know, in the bank, we have this thing called do good, feel good for staff. And what we try and say is if you do something good, you'll feel good about it, both at work and in your home life. And it's absolutely true. And if you help a client, genuinely help a client, you're doing something good for the client and you will feel good you've helped them. Break it down to simple terms. When you go out your front door today, if you go out and smile at someone, use their name in a shop, say thank you, all those things will improve that person's day, and they might smile back at you. And then you'll feel better as well, and everyone feels better just because you bothered to smile and use their name. So you haven't got to go and raise £1,000 to do good. The do good is, you know, you're driving your car and there's a queue of traffic, letting the car out in front of you. It's just an amazing thing because they'll come and then they'll probably thank you, stick the hazards on for 4 seconds and say thanks. And then they'll probably let someone else out as well. And that kind of stuff just makes the world a better place.
Yeah.
And what we all should do. So I encourage that. So what's next for me? I've got my next race is called the Spine. Well, it's called the Spine Challenger. So it's in January the 7th, and I'm basically running up the Pennine Way. And I'm only doing a short race, which is 120 miles. I've got 3 hours, which you might think, 2 miles an hour, that's easy. It's not. All I can say to you is when you're carrying 8 kilos on your back and you're going up big mountains and hills, and it's probably going to be snowy and cold, very cold, or maybe wet. It's not easy. And day one, if I'm lucky, I might be able to sleep somewhere that's got a roof. But day 2, the way it works out, the chances are I'll be sleeping next to a wall somewhere on the Pennine Way, hopefully out of the wind, probably not out of the rain. So it's great. I love those sort of challenges. I like doing things where there's jeopardy. You know, if you're someone that always runs 10-kilometre races, by all means, go and run on a 10-kilometre race. You'll bang it out. Fantastic. But there's no risk, really, of you not finishing it if that's what you always do. Whereas a race like this, I love because there's no guarantee I'll finish it. Whilst I'm probably fit enough, circumstances can get in the way. And if I don't finish it, so what? I may have failed to finish, but I only failed if I didn't prepare right, if I didn't try my best. So a lot of things in life is about a mental challenge. Physically, if something stopped over, it's in the desert this year. Physically, I was ill. Okay, so I couldn't do it. It wasn't mental, it was physical. I couldn't do it. There's no point being upset about something that was physically beyond my control. But when things just get hard and you go, I'm going to jack it in, that's when I think, well, shame on you, really. Just get up and go again. Because if you get up and go again, the mental reward you get from completing a task is massive. So, I would always suggest to people that just train your brain. Most ultra running, so an ultra marathons are anything longer than a marathon.
Right.
So running, it's a mental thing, about 90%. If you're not fit, don't even start. But assuming you're fit enough, then it's mental. Because if you're going to run 50 kilometres in one go, it's going to hurt. You're going to get a blister probably. You may feel sick for a part of the race, possibly. But that's only feelings. It's not going to stop you unless you want it to stop you.
No.
And that's all about the bling. At the end you get a medal. All about the bling. Medals are draw. I don't actually really want them, but I want to cross the line, and that's symbolically the medal is important. It's not important.
Kevin, I'm sure, like our audience and our listeners, will be absolutely inspired by hearing you today and maybe watching you where you can on YouTube. I'm sure they would love to dig deep and maybe sponsor you on this race coming up. How can they find you?
Well, the easiest way, having said don't go on Google unless you know where you're going, the easiest way is this. If you Google Kevin Webber prostate cancer, you will find tons and tons of things about my life, and you'll probably find somewhere to sponsor me. Or, another thing to do is, and selfless plug for my book, but, it's on Amazon. It will be a great Christmas present for someone because it will genuinely, the response I've had from people. So I wasn't sure when I wrote it whether it had any benefit at all for anyone apart from me having written it. And the response I've had is people have read that and said, you know what, I'm going to go and do something. Not necessarily running, but I always say, if you wanted to bake a better cake but never did, you've got to go and practice. If you want to play the guitar, you can't just do it. If you want to speak Spanish, you can't just do it. For me, it's running. But for someone else, they always wanted to. If you always wanted to do it, you will find a way. And one of my pet hates is bucket lists. There are some things that should be on a bucket list. So for me, the Marathon of Sables was my bucket list. And that's because the time, the money, the skill to do it, I'd never had the time to do it all. And so then I suddenly had the time and the money to do it all. So I did it. But if on your bucket list you've got something like having a tattoo, what are you waiting for? If you really want that, if that's what you want, you don't have to wait till you're ill or 60 or 70 years old to do it. Just go out tomorrow and have it done. If you want to go skydiving, it's 150 quid. Just go and do it. Don't wait until my 50th birthday. And you're 46, you might not get to 50. One of the best inspirations I ever, I've hopefully inspired a few people, and I'm not trying to be big-headed, but I hope I've inspired a few people. But my favourite story of all is a guy called Nick Butter. I met Nick in 2016 in the Sahara. He's in my tent. Bear in mind, I was 51. He was about 26, 25, fit as anything. And he said to me, Kevin, he said, when I'm 30, I'm going to do this. And when I'm 35, I'm going to do that. When I'm 40, I'm going to do this. And they were all really wow, adventurous tasks. I looked at him, I thought, but what you don't realise, mate, is when you're 35, you may well be married with kids and a big mortgage. And therefore, whilst you might want to do those things, you maybe never will. So I looked him in the eyes and I said, Nick, don't wait for a rubbish prognosis before you realise if you really want to do it now. Anyway, end of conversation. About 6 months later, Nick phones me up. We all stay in touch. And that particular tent on the race was an amazing tent. So Nick phones me up, said, can we have a chat? I said, yeah. He said, right, I packed him a job and I'm going to run a marathon in every country in the world. No one's ever done it before. So he did. He went off and ran 196 marathons, one in every country in the world. Said never been done before, maybe never done again. And he said, I'll do it for Prostate Cancer UK. So he raised over £100,000 Prostate Cancer UK.
Brilliant.
I joined him on the last one in Athens. There was about 15 of us in prostate cancer for raising money for them out there in Athens. Fantastic day. We didn't try and run it fast. I think it was 5 hours something. Great marathon, really good fun. My wife came out. She didn't always come out to races. just a really, really good day. And then Nick went on and he ran the length of Italy doing 2 marathons a day, and he just ran around the coast of Britain. You know, that conversation, if we hadn't had it, maybe right now, 6 years on, he'd be at a desk somewhere, earning good money with a mortgage, and he would never fulfill the thing that he had in his capabilities. So that's the bit, is if you want it enough, prevaricate, don't put it off, just find it.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Wise words. And you're an absolute inspiration. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been lovely to chat to you. Thank you once again, Kevin Webber. Thank you once again to Kevin Webber for sharing his story with us. If you've been inspired to donate to Prostate Cancer UK, head over to the show notes page on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you'll find a link. Remember that if you prefer to watch my conversations, you'll find them on my YouTube channel, which is Justin King MFP, along with a whole series of other videos to help you plan for and live a successful retirement. So until next time, I'm Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.